a small-town music legend killed in a hit-and-run.
This wasn't something accidental. Somebody floored it and ran somebody over and then left them to die.
I wanted to know why. How could somebody do this?
Loved ones suspect it's the result of an escalating family feud.
The brothers, we're looking for them. They have some kind of beef.
If anyone could have done or would have done anything to him, it would be them.
But when detectives find the hit-and-run vehicle, its owner identifies another suspect.
She's making statements like, I'm gonna kill him. He doesn't deserve the air he breathes.
She's in the car and she's the one that ran him over.
But can he be trusted?
Do you intend to answer truthfully every question?
Investigators soon find themselves on the trail of a killer driven by revenge.
Those pictures were not going anywhere, and she was going to be the laughingstock of Cowpens.
She was mad. She was very furious. She threatened him several times.
It was an innocent man's life that got taken. Answers still need to be served.
Tucked away in upstate South Carolina is the tiny town of Cowpens.
It kind of modern-day Dukes of Hazzard, everybody knows each other.
It's just before 3 a.m. on December 27, 2015, when some passersby make an alarming discovery.
They call 911 and state that they had seen a body in the roadway on Cemetery Street in Cowpens.
First responders find no identification on the man, but one of the officers on the scene realizes she saw him about an hour ago.
Earlier that night, at about approximately 2 o'clock in the morning, she was at a local gas station. While she's in line checking out, she sees the individual, Brent Tesnier.
She knew him. Everybody pretty much knew everybody down there. She could tell he had been drinking and might need a ride home.
She does try to offer him a ride. He says he's fine. He lives, not far down the road, maybe a mile, and he's walked this route many times.
At first glance, it's unclear what happened to Brent after he left the convenience store.
They can't really see any sort of physical signs of harm. They don't see a gunshot wound or anything like that. Officer Wolf thought maybe it had something to do with him being under the influence or some sort of a heart attack.
But once paramedics load Brent into an ambulance, the officer spots an important clue.
There were some tire marks or tread marks on his clothing. So she starts to believe that maybe that this individual was hit with a car.
Do we need to have highway patrol out here in case this was just a random hit and run by a drunk driver?
To local police, a late-night hit-and-run accident seems likely. But there is another, more disturbing possibility.
Right near where he was hit, there looked like there was tire tracks.
There's no way to tell what direction the car was coming from, how fast it was going, what kind of car it was. But it appeared that the car veered off the road, then came back onto the road.
They have to consider that the driver may have intentionally swerved to mow down Brent.
It was possible that somebody floored it and ran somebody over and then left them to die.
The problem for investigators is that there isn't enough evidence at the scene to determine which situation they're dealing with. So as the ambulance rushes Brent to the ER, they run a records check in the hopes of learning more about their victim.
So at this point in time, they start to really develop a picture of the victim in order to determine, who could have possibly done this to him.
Brent Tesnier was born January 14, 1979 in Spartanburg, South Carolina. From an early age, he seemed destined to become a musician.
Everybody knew the Tessiniers. We all just came to their house for all the music get-togethers, all the holidays. Everything was done involved around music.
I've been playing all my life. I was raised in the music. The biggest part of majority of Brent's life was the music. I bought a drum set at age 4, and about all he wanted to do, he carried his drumsticks around everywhere he went, rat-a-tatting on everything he could.
He started moving up to singing, playing the guitar, and things like that.
By his early teens, Brent was a regular on the local music circuit, and he seemed willing to do whatever it took to succeed.
Brent didn't finish school because he figured out the lifestyle of a teenager, and other things was more important to him at the time.
Part of that lifestyle included partying after his gigs.
Brent did have some substance abuse issues. He drank alcohol.
I wish he'd just stayed in the church more than the bars, but that was a part of their life.
Despite his demons, one of Brent's biggest supporters was his high school sweetheart, Jennifer Bragg. The young couple's lives were changed forever when Jennifer unexpectedly got pregnant while they were teens.
He had his first daughter. The first time he put eyes on that little girl, he dropped on his knees and said, "Lord, if she's following me, I need to follow you."
In 1999, at the age of 20, Brent and Jennifer married. He decided to leave his partying behind and pursue his true calling.
He went to school to become a preacher.
He got in church, changed his life around.
He told me when he was at church doing what he felt like he was called to do, he felt at peace.
Over the next several years, Brent and Jennifer welcomed 2 more children.
He would work construction or whatever music gigs that was playing in town that would pay him, but he always provided for his family.
Him and Jennifer, you'd think they'd be, inseparable for the rest of their life. But the devil has his ways of coming in and changing things like that.
As much as Brent tried to focus on faith and family, the lure of the local nightlife proved too strong for him to ignore.
Him and Jennifer at the time was having some issues where her trying to keep him straight and him staying out late just pretty much took a toll.
At 30, after a decade of marriage, Brent and Jennifer divorced. Brent fully embraced his new bachelor status.
When they split up, Brent, he went out, started partying. He just left her everything and went back to a wild side.
He also reconnected with a childhood friend named Angelita Wright.
She literally lived right beside us, and she'd go to church with all of us. She's always had a crush on Brent all the way growing up.
Angelita Wright was like those small-town girls who would never leave home. It was easy for her to fit into that lifestyle with Brent and become inseparable, because if there was a party, if there was a gig, she was there and supportive of him.
I honestly thought they'll run the roads for a little while and then he'll go back home, but within a year or 2, they was married.
Angelita and Brent had 3 more children together, but after 5 years of marriage, they decided to separate.
To be honest with you, he tried his best to straighten up, but she wouldn't calm down.
Despite the separation, they were able to co-parent and be there for their children that they had together.
By 2015, Brent was a 36-year-old divorced father of 6 with a second divorce from Angelita in the works. He was still playing music, but he'd managed to find a balance between pursuing his dreams and being a provider.
He bought a house in Cowpens, and it was cute and really simple. So he took me and my little siblings there and told us that everything was going to be okay and that we'll have a life there.
He was doing good. He bought him a house. He got a full-time job at the concrete company. He was posting his music.
He's wrote a lot of songs. He was supposed to went to divorce in February.
But any aspirations Brent had are now in jeopardy as he's rushed to the hospital in critical condition.
They try to perform some life-saving measures on him, but ultimately he does end up dying around 3 o'clock in the morning.
They determined that with his injuries, the internal bleeding to his organs, that it was consistent with him being hit and run over.
And at that point, it was considered a potential homicide.
Investigators contact Brent's next of kin to deliver the tragic news and try to get some answers.
The investigators called Angelita Wright and asked if Angelita was related to Brent Tesnier. Angelita states that yes, that she's related to him, that she's his wife, and asks, oh my gosh, is he okay? The investigator comes out and states that Brent had been killed. She just loses it. Extremely upset.
Angelita said she had not seen him that entire day.
It leaves investigators with no suspects and very little to determine whether this was an accident or intentional.
No leads, no evidence, just a body, and now trying to piece together what really happened.
Coming up, a tip jumpstarts the investigation.
They show up at the house with a pipe or some kind of blunt force object, and they're looking for Brent.
And detectives uncover a powerful motive.
It was revenge porn. I mean, that's what it is.
In the early morning hours of December 27, 2015, news of Brent Tesnier's death spreads among his family and friends in Cowpens, South Carolina.
I woke up to a text message. In capital letters, it said, Brent's dead. So I just, there's no way. I just talked to him the night before. And it was just like a feeling that I'll never forget.
He's gone. My body went numb. I went blank.
The following day, detectives receive a tip that provides their first clear lead in the case.
911 receives a call from a friend of Brent's.
He believes the hit and run was the result of a feud with two men known as the Evans brothers. He suggests police get in touch with Brent's brother, Lucas Tesnier, for more information.
Lucas gives a statement that the day before, maybe December 25th, the Evans brothers show up at the house with a pipe or some kind of blunt force object, and they're looking for Brent. The Evans brothers thought that Brent had stolen their cell phone, and they clearly wanted it back. They were upset.
Brent, he would go down there and they would hang out and play music, and then the cell phone supposedly got missing. The lady that Brent supposedly stole the cell phone from is now married to an Evans.
Brent wasn't home, but Lucas says the Evans brothers continued to bang on the doors and windows.
There was an altercation there where they had tried to break in.
Lucas has to kind of calm the situation down, and they kind of come at him very aggressively. And at that point, Lucas goes back inside the house to get something to fend them off.
By the time he comes out, the individuals are in a car storming off, and that car is a larger SUV.
At this point, we have Brent with some kind of blunt force injury, with someone in a SUV that is probably big enough to cause that damage, and most importantly, motive.
When detectives check Brent's criminal history, they discover he's been busted for burglary and assault in the past. While killing someone over a stolen cell phone seems extreme, there could be more to this tip than they initially thought. Before detectives can pursue the lead, they receive a call from one of Brent's neighbors.
She's seeing somebody attempt to break into Brent's home. Law enforcement responds, and who they find is Angelita Wright, Brent's wife, along with a friend of hers, Amy Paget.
Amy says that after learning that Brent was gone, Angelita wanted to go to Brent's home to retrieve some of her items, retrieve a cell phone, some potential Christmas gifts. Detectives say the investigation is active and that no one can enter the home at that time.
They're not going to allow her to go in there and potentially take something that could be of evidentiary value.
They start asking her a little bit about her relationship with Brent at that time, and that's when she tells them that she's separated from him.
She lets them know that, look, even though we're raising our kids together and we're amicable, we haven't seen each other in a while.
She says the Evans brothers, we're looking for them. They have some kind of beef.
She says if anyone could have done or would have done anything to Brent, it would be them, because she knew the history and the animosity that was between them. This is the second confirmation of this confrontation between the Evans brothers and Brent. So now police have to go figure out where they were and what they were doing at the time of Brent's death.
In a town as small as Cowpens, the Evans brothers aren't hard to find. Detectives stop by their house to see what they have to say about the alleged feud.
Police see that champagne-colored SUV that was mentioned, and they don't see any damage on their SUV. The Evans brothers were forthcoming with information about their feud with Brent. They let police know that they were looking for him and that they were trying to find this cell phone that they say was stolen.
The brothers claim they had no intention of killing Brent and were out of town when the hit and run took place.
It was reported that these two guys were at a funeral that was nowhere near where Brent died.
Being able to quickly confirm that they did have an alibi for the night of the 26th and the morning of the 27th, they were able to clear them.
At this point, law enforcement needed to find a new direction for this investigation to go.
In hopes of getting answers, Brent's family turns to the local media for help.
Angelita met a crew from our station at the scene of where Brent died with some of his family members.
It was an innocent man's life that got taken. Whether it be a hit and run or whether somebody hurt him, answers still need to be served.
I was there, and we all kind of just stood together, but she did all the talking. And I was like, something's off about her.
She didn't have many tears. She was dry.
She's standing right there where her husband and where the father of her kids had just been run over, showing no emotion. Her demeanor didn't really match up with, the emotions that she should be having. It was pretty bizarre.
It's much different from the extreme emotion she'd shown when talking with police just hours earlier.
Angelita very much looked like she was hiding something.
Less than 48 hours after Brent Tesnier's death in a potential hit-and-run murder, local news covers the family's pleas for help. Brent's neighbor Sherry sees the broadcast and immediately picks up the phone.
Sherry was familiar with Brent and with Angelita since she lived close by and knew them well.
Sherry lets police know that Angelita does have a reason to be mad at Brent, and she was mad enough to potentially have done this.
Angelita had provided information to law enforcement that she and Brent were still amicable with one another. What law enforcement starts to find out is that that is the exact opposite.
Both of them had their problems, and their marriage was very volatile.
According to Sherry, arguments between the couple had been escalating into acts of revenge, and Brent had stepped over the line.
Sherry tells police that she went to the house on the 26th to borrow something from Brent, and he shows her that he had posted some explicit pictures of a woman, and he had tagged Angelita in those pictures on Facebook.
Whether they were Angelita or not, he was trying to insinuate that it was her or send some kind of message to her.
It was revenge porn. I mean, that's what it is.
Not only did Sherry see that Facebook post itself, Brent shows Sherry several text messages that Angelita had sent him after that post was made. Angelita is telling Brent, you know, you better take this down, take it down now, or I'm gonna come over to Cowpens and I'm gonna kill you. Sherry didn't really ever see Angelita as being a super violent person, but with the information that she had, she decided she needed to at least provide law enforcement with the information.
After Brent's family has had time to grieve, investigators turn to them for more insight on the dynamics between Brent and Angelita.
We learned that Angelita's background was kind of tumultuous.
Her mom was murdered, and then her dad went to prison. So she was raised by her grandparents. They tried to give her the best life that they could.
She kind of fell into some of those same substance abuse issues that Brent had.
When Brent came back into Angelita's life, their shared experiences made the bond between them stronger.
She was his shoulder to cry on, and he leaned on her for support.
They were both partiers, and I think there became a point in time in Brent's life when he really wanted to better himself for his kids.
Brent's family says that was the beginning of the end for the relationship.
He'd started making steps and trying to get his life together.
He gave her a choice. He told her, look, I bought us a house. Let's get away from everybody and let's raise our kids. And then she would not stop partying. So he was like, I'll do it by myself. He was fighting for custody of the kids because she might pop in, take a picture, oh, I love you guys, and then back out the door she went. And it might be a week or two before you seen her again. So he was like, I'm not gonna let my kids grow up like this.
She was mad. She was very furious because Brent told her it was over. His done filed for divorce. She said that wasn't gonna happen. She threatened him several times, and he just brushed it off.
The family informs detectives that Brent's Facebook post only made things worse.
So the night before Brent was killed, she pulls up and she was like, get in touch with Brent. He posted pictures of me on Facebook and I want him to take them down right now. And I was like, well, maybe you need to go home and cool off.
It was the polar opposite of what they'd heard from Angelita.
Not only are they having to look at the lies that Angelita's providing them, they're also provided with this sort of motive with that Facebook post.
Detectives do believe that revenge porn is a powerful motive, but they're trying to piece together the facts because Angelita doesn't have a car. So who could have helped her?
Detectives don't have to look very far for a potential co-conspirator. Word on the street quickly provides them a name: Brandon Blackwood.
Brandon, too, was from this small town, grew up there, grew up with his grandparents, had a grandparent that was in law enforcement, and it was a pretty big deal, so people knew who he was.
Multiple witnesses report seeing Angelita with Brandon on the night of Brent's death.
The way that they're getting around is in Brandon Blackwood's white truck.
When they go to Brandon's grandparents' house to locate Brandon and kind of talk to him about what happened that day, his white truck's in front of the house. And law enforcement arriving, take the opportunity to do a little loop around that truck and see if there's any damage or anything.
What they see is some front bumper damage. They see a smear on the front bumper that looks like it could be blood. And they also see what ultimately looks as some hair wrapped around a bolt at the front of the car. They start to think that this vehicle is actually the murder weapon.
Coming up, an eyewitness gives a harrowing confession.
He says she turns on the brights, realizes that it's Brent Tesnier, and she floors it.
But is he telling the truth?
When I get intensely pressured, I say whatever I need to say.
Two days into the investigation of Brent Tesnier's murder, investigators impound Brandon Blackwood's truck and send blood samples for testing.
Now, police have a lot of things that they can question Brandon about. Who was driving the truck? Why is this damage here? Did you hit Brent? He goes down to the Spartanburg Sheriff's Office to give them a statement.
Detectives start by having Brandon tell them how he came to be involved with Brent's wife, Angelita.
There was quite an age difference between them. I think she was 27, 28, and I think he was 19 or 20.
Brandon describes his relationship with Angelita as just being friends, that they hang out together, that they occasionally party together.
When asked about the night of Brent's murder, Brandon confirms that he and Angelita were together.
He basically describes him and Angelita drinking all day and possibly doing some drugs.
They make a stop to see one of their friends, and that's when Carol shows them the post that was on Brent's Facebook page. And of course, she tells them that she's angry that these explicit pictures are online.
Angelita starts making statements like, "I'm gonna kill him. He doesn't deserve the air he breathes."
He says they end up going to several other houses where, the anger towards Brent continues. They continue to drink. She starts telling people how she's going to go over there to cow pens and, set them straight.
During the course of this, while they're driving around, going to places, Brandon's continually drinking. He's been drinking all day.
At this point, Brandon says to police that Angelita takes over driving.
Brandon says his memory after that becomes hazy, but he recalls a late-night stop at a local gas station.
Brandon says that Angelita gets out the car because Brent's there and they start getting into this fight, this altercation. Brandon says it lasts about 15 minutes, but again, he says he's so drunk that he's just kind of fading in and out the entire time.
Angelita gets back into the car, slams the car angrily, and she peels out of the parking lot, going down these back roads of cow pens. It's dark, it's middle of the night. Brandon still says he's hazy, but he remembers seeing a person in front of the vehicle.
He tells her to be careful, that someone's walking, and she turns on the brights, realizes that it's Brent Tesnier, and she floors it. She runs him over. Brandon starts to freak out, tells her to go back, and she goes, "Don't worry, he'll be fine," and she drives off.
He was asked, why didn't you come forward? Why didn't you tell us what happened that night? He expressed that he was concerned because his truck was the truck that was used, that, he was going to get in trouble for this.
Brandon's account matches the evidence found on his truck and at the scene. But when investigators confront Angelita, her account is different.
She's brought in, she's not under arrest at this point. She's asked to kind of tell us what happened that day.
She does admit to going to other people's houses and to making those statements about being angry at him for that Facebook post, but she makes it sound like she's saying all of it in jest.
She did see those explicit pictures, but this was still the father of her kids, and that she would never wish him harm or death. And she denies that she played a role in his death.
Angelita claims Brandon dropped her off at a friend's house around 1 a.m. and continued partying without her.
When Angelita's kind of recounting that night with law enforcement, she's pretty emphatic, and she tells them, "I was not in that car during the time that Brent was killed." But that's the interesting part. Nobody in the family knew at that point in time what time Brent was killed.
My question to her was, if you were not there, then how did you know when his time of death was? She could not answer that.
The reason she knows it is because she's in the car and she's the one that ran him over.
Detectives keep Angelita in custody while they look for physical evidence to link her to the hit and run.
Brandon's white truck has been taken into custody by law enforcement to kind of do a review of what's inside of it.
What they find is in the center console is Brandon Blackwood's wallet with his ID. And then in the pocket of the driver's side door is Angelita Wright's driver's license.
Finding her driver's license in a door side pocket would raise some serious questions. It's not her vehicle. If she has never been on the driver's side of that truck, how would it end up in that pocket?
On December 31st, 2015, 4 days after Brent Tesnier's death, Cowpens police arrest Angelita Wright for his murder.
After Angelita's arrested, she and Brent's 3 young kids go and live with her grandmother.
They decide not to charge the other person in the car, Brandon Blackwood, with any crime.
Brandon's just a witness in this case. He doesn't appear to have been acting in concert with Angelita and running over Brent Tesnier.
The prosecutors are able to set a court date, but police are still collecting evidence.
Unfortunately, DNA results from the hair and blood samples collected from the grill of the truck proved to be inconclusive.
What we learned from the forensic analysis of the truck is that really nothing existed. That spot that they thought was blood ended up not being blood. They weren't able to make a match on the hair around the bolt on the front of the car.
There was all kinds of reasons why that blood or that DNA may not come back as a match. Rain, weather, it's on the outdoor of a truck. All these things can affect the sample.
Without direct evidence, the case hinges on Brandon's testimony, and prosecutors know the defense will present him as an unreliable witness.
He was drunk that night, admittedly drunk, so there's going to be a few things that you have to take into account.
The solicitor's office brings in Brandon to help prepare him for trial. Extremely common. What they typically do is run through their questions with him, and then they also try to prepare him for cross-examination. They start to realize that he looks extremely nervous, that he looks fidgety, that he's being pretty evasive. They start to really poke and prod him. You know, is there a specific reason why you don't want to answer these questions? Is it because maybe you were more involved? And they start to really interrogate him.
Instead of his testimony becoming stronger, it changes and potentially blows up their entire case.
Brandon now says that he's driving the car. Angelita keeps telling him, run him over, do it, he's right over there. And he ultimately does.
Authorities have no choice but to arrest Brandon while they attempt to sort through his varying statements.
Why is his story different now? Days before the trial, they are now scrambling to figure out, does this really change the entire trajectory of charging Angelita with the murder?
At this point, her trial is put on hold because the whole case needs to be reassessed.
Less than a week after Brandon's confession, authorities conduct a follow-up interview. Once again, he changes his story, claiming he was mentally impaired during the trial preparation.
What we find out from Brandon is that he had smoked some weed beforehand because he was extremely nervous about meeting with law enforcement officers.
He started giving them answers that he thought they were looking for, rather than what actually happened.
When I get intensely pressured, I break down.
Okay.
And when I break down, I get to a point where I say whatever I need to say to get them to leave me alone.
Brandon says his original statement was correct. Angelita was the one behind the wheel that night.
Let's get this straight. What you're telling me now, here,
Yes, sir.
is that she's the one who drove the truck over Brent, basically.
Yes, sir.
To prove he's telling the truth, Brandon submits to a polygraph.
Regarding who did Brent, do you intend to answer truthfully every question about that?
But the polygraph determined that he was lying. It detected deception. But when he says that Angelita was in the car, it says that he was telling the truth. So it doesn't really bring much clarity to the situation other than that they were both in the car.
This is the thing with polygraphs. I know people who can pass a polygraph, lying their butt off. But I know people that can't pass a polygraph to save their life. They're telling the truth. And that's exactly why they're not admissible in court.
Despite the vagueness of the test result, prosecutors are inclined to believe Brandon.
From the overview of all of the evidence, not just looking at this one statement, Angelita's driver's license and the driver's side door obviously was very important to show that she was on the driver's side of that car that night.
False confessions happen all the time. Brandon said what he thought people wanted to hear at that moment. For us, it ultimately ended up being, that Angelita was the person that we felt was responsible for Brent's death.
Prosecutors have enough to go to trial. They have the question of, will it land her in jail?
The decision to use Brandon as a witness in this trial was a risk because this guy at one point in time said he was the driver. How is that not reasonable doubt?
On November 27, 2017, Angelita Wright's trial for the murder of her estranged husband Brent Tesnier begins in South Carolina. Prosecutors tell the jury Angelita's anger over their pending divorce and the explicit photos Brent posted online boiled over into rage when she saw him walking down the side of the road the night of the homicide.
It was really kind of two trials in one for us to show Angelita did it and Brandon didn't do it. It was a risk, it was a liability, but we knew it was something we couldn't hide throughout the case. We knew it was gonna come out, so we embraced it and kind of hit it, head on.
Despite the unreliability of Brandon's testimony, the prosecution decides to put him on the stand.
He testified about everything that happened that night, including Angelita driving and running over Brent.
He puts her behind the wheel. So a very important statement for us.
They paint a picture for the jury of Angelita as a woman scorned.
She figured out Brent was done. He was fighting for the kids. She didn't want that. He was filing for a divorce. She didn't want that. She wanted Brent to continue to be with her, but live her lifestyle, and he wasn't going to do it anymore.
Prosecutors argue that when her husband posted nude photos of her, Angelita's anger and resentment finally boiled over.
It was a progression that day. She was running around drinking alcohol with Brandon. She progressively kept getting angrier and angrier. I think eventually the alcohol and what he had done that day drove her to run him over with the truck.
She snapped because she couldn't control the situation. Those pictures were not going anywhere, and she was going to be the laughingstock of Cowpens.
He didn't want to be with her, so she fixed it. We couldn't be with nobody.
As further evidence, the prosecution submits Angelita's text messages following Brent's death.
Angelita sent a message to Brandon Blackwood less than 24 hours after Brent had been run over And in that message, she sent Brandon something along the lines of, feel like walking to the store, LOL.
The only reason that text would be sent was as a inside joke between those two of, hey, Brent was walking to the store and we ran him over with the truck. The text makes no sense with any text before it. It makes no sense with any text after it. She was almost celebrating what they did and laughing about it.
As expected, Angelita's attorneys spend most of their efforts trying to discredit the prosecution's star witness.
The defense did a pretty good job of trying to paint Brandon as somebody that would kind of say whatever he wanted to get out of trouble. They highlighted his changing statements multiple times. And if you don't know who to believe, then that's reasonable doubt.
On November 30th, 2017, the jury delivers its verdict.
Angelita was found guilty of murder and was sentenced to 30 years.
The only remorse she showed was for herself, that she was going to have to spend the time in prison. She showed no remorse for the fact that Brent was dead.
She should have got more, because she took somebody close to us away. We can't get him back. Once I lost him, I lost myself, I lost the world, I lost everything.
When I first found out my mom was going to jail, it brought me to, because I didn't just lose one parent, I lost two. I know people must think I hate her, but I don't. That might be hard to hear for some people. My family, I understand why they hate her. She took something away from them that they loved dearly, and from her kids too. But at the same time, she did give me life, so I still love her, but from a distance.
A lot of people looked up to Brent and his talent and who he was as a person. No matter what, he'll always be my hero. He chose the wrong path in life sometimes, but he was always my go-to when I needed somebody. He was always there for me. Life's definitely not the same without him.
The human heart is capable of harboring both beautiful creative impulses and dark, destructive passions, a duality that frequently manifests in the quietest corners of our world. In small, close-knit communities where everyone knows everyone else, the boundaries between private lives and public reputation often blur, creating a highly volatile environment when personal conflicts arise. The tragic case of Brent Tesnier, a beloved local musician from the small town of Cowpens, South Carolina, serves as a profound and sobering case study in how unchecked anger, fueled by substance abuse and the magnifying glass of social media, can escalate into a senseless loss of life. By analyzing the motives behind such crimes, the critical clues that allow law enforcement to unravel complex webs of lies, and the broader societal lessons we must draw from these tragedies, we can gain a deeper understanding of how to protect our communities and foster a culture of peace and resolution. To understand why cases like this occur with such troubling frequency, one must examine the psychological landscape of personal disputes in the modern digital age. Often, the underlying motive in crimes of passion is not a cold, calculated desire for material gain, but rather a chaotic mixture of rejection, wounded pride, and the perceived destruction of one's social standing. In a small town, a person's reputation is their currency. When private, sensitive conflicts are thrust into the public eye, particularly through the rapid and permanent medium of social media, the emotional response can be instantaneous and overwhelming. The sharing of highly sensitive, private photographs without consent, commonly referred to as digital retaliation, strikes at the very core of an individual's dignity. Instead of seeking legal recourse or turning to trusted support systems, some individuals allow their anger to morph into a desire for immediate, physical vengeance. The tragedy is that this search for retribution is entirely counterproductive, destroying multiple lives in a single moment of rage. There is a mild, dark irony in the fact that those who commit such crimes to avoid embarrassment end up permanently cementing their shame in the public record through a trial and a prison sentence, exchanging a temporary blow to their pride for a lifetime of incarceration. When analyzing the details and clues that the police rely on to track down perpetrators in these seemingly chaotic hit-and-run incidents, we see the absolute necessity of meticulous, methodical police work. In many instances, the criminal believes that the absence of eyewitnesses on a dark, deserted road at 3 o'clock in the morning guarantees their escape. However, they consistently underestimate the silent physical evidence left behind and the psychological tells that betray their guilt. In this case, the investigation began with a highly observant first responder who noticed tread marks on the victim's clothing and tire tracks that veered off the road and returned, suggesting a deliberate action rather than a random accident. This immediate physical observation shifted the case from a tragic accident to a potential homicide investigation, demonstrating how critical early scene assessment is to the pursuit of justice. Furthermore, investigators rely heavily on establishing a precise timeline and analyzing behavioral anomalies. When the victim's estranged wife, Angelita Wright, was informed of his passing, her initial reaction of extreme distress quickly gave way to a bizarrely detached, dry-eyed appearance during public appeals for answers. This stark shift in demeanor is a classic behavioral red flag that experienced detectives recognize immediately. It is an enduring truth of criminal psychology that guilt is an incredibly heavy burden to carry, and those who attempt to simulate grief often fail to maintain the illusion under scrutiny. Even more damning was her slip of the tongue during questioning. By emphatically stating she was not present at the time the victim was run over. Before the police had ever publicly or privately disclosed the estimated time of death, she inadvertently revealed her intimate knowledge of the crime. This classic psychological slip is a powerful weapon in an investigator's arsenal, proving that the truth has a way of forcing its way to the surface, no matter how carefully a suspect tries to bury it. The physical search of the vehicle used in the crime yielded another crucial piece of evidence that could not be easily explained away. While forensic science is a vital tool, environmental factors hot as weather and outdoor exposure, can sometimes render DNA and fluid samples inconclusive. In this investigation, the breakthrough came not from microscopic particles, but from a common-sense search of the vehicle's interior. Finding the driver's license of the suspect tucked neatly into the pocket of the driver's side door of a truck that did not belong to her was a devastating blow to her defense. It defied logical explanation for an individual who claimed to have had no contact with the vehicle during the hours surrounding the crime, to have left her primary identification in the exact spot where a driver would sit. This detail underscores how the most mundane items can become the ultimate undoing of a criminal plan. The sophistication of the criminals in this case, or rather the lack thereof, highlight a common theme in impulsive homicides. The perpetrators did not possess a master plan. Instead, they acted on a toxic combination of alcohol, anger, and a sudden opportunity. Their attempts to cover their tracks were clumsy and disorganized, involving frantic visits to various acquaintances, shifting stories, and eventually a highly suspicious attempt by the suspect to break into the victim's home under the guise of retrieving personal items. This desperation to gain access to the victim's cell phone and belongings shortly after the crime is a common behavior among perpetrators who realize they have left a digital or physical trail and are scrambling to erase it. From this tragic loss of life, we must draw profound life lessons to prevent similar occurrences in our own communities. First and foremost is the absolute necessity of anger management and conflict resolution. When personal disputes arise, especially those involving the painful breakdown of a marriage and custody battles, individuals must have access to healthy coping mechanisms, seeking the assistance of family counselors, legal professionals, or spiritual advisors can provide a safe outlet for grief and anger, preventing these emotions from curdling into violence. Additionally, the role of social media in modern disputes cannot be overstated. We must educate the community on the severe psychological and legal consequences of using digital platforms to humiliate or retaliate against others. What might seem like a momentary act of revenge can set off a catastrophic chain of events that cannot be undone. To help the police catch perpetrators faster in the future, communities must foster strong relationships with local law enforcement. In this case, the rapid resolution of the investigation was made possible because neighbors and family members were willing to step forward with critical information, such as the details of the threatening text messages and the identity of the individual who owned the white truck. A community that actively cooperates with investigators is a community that protects itself. Furthermore, the implementation of modern technology, such as public security cameras, license plate readers, and digital forensics, can drastically reduce the time it takes to identify suspect vehicles and establish timelines, ensuring that justice is swift and certain. The story of Brent Tesnier begins long before the fateful morning of December 27, 2015, in the upstate region of South Carolina. Born on January 14, 1979, in Spartanburg, Brent was a child of the foothills, raised in a home where music was not just a hobby, but the very heartbeat of daily life. The Tesnier household was a gathering place for friends and family, a sanctuary where holidays were celebrated with the strumming of guitars, the steady beat of drums, and the harmonious blending of voices. From the tender age of 4, when his father bought him his first drum set, it was clear that Brent possessed a natural, irrepressible musical talent. He carried his drumsticks with him everywhere, tapping out rhythms on every surface he could find, dreaming of the day he would perform on larger stages. As he grew into his teenage years, Brent's passion for music only intensified. He transitioned from the drums to singing and playing the guitar, displaying a charismatic stage presence that quickly made him a regular and popular figure on the local music circuit. However, the allure of the musicianess lifestyle brought with it significant challenges. The late-night gigs and the celebratory atmosphere of the local venues introduced him to a world of partying and substance abuse, temptations that would struggle against his better angels for the rest of his life. Despite these personal demons, those who knew him best remembered a warm, generous soul who possessed a deep desire to do good. His high school sweetheart, Jennifer Bragg, saw the promise within him, and when she unexpectedly became pregnant during their teenage years, Brent experienced a profound moment of spiritual awakening. Looking upon his newborn daughter, he was filled with a sense of awe and responsibility. prompting him to drop to his knees and pledge to turn his life around. In 1999, at the age of 20, Brent and Jennifer married, and Brent took the extraordinary step of studying to become a preacher. For several years, he found a deep, abiding peace in the church, balancing his construction work and occasional music gigs with his responsibilities as a father of 3 and a spiritual leader. Yet, the struggle between his desire for a stable, faith-filled life and the powerful pull of the nightlife remained a constant undercurrent. Eventually, the strain of these competing forces took a toll on his marriage, and after a decade together, Brent and Jennifer divorced. Returning to the bachelor life, Brent slipped back into his old habits of late-night partying. It was during this period that he reconnected with Angelita Wright, a childhood friend who had lived next door to his family and had harbored a crush on him for as long as anyone could remember. Angelita, a small-town girl who had experienced her own share of childhood trauma, including the tragic loss of her mother, easily fell into the fast-paced, party-centric lifestyle that Brent was currently leading. Within a couple of years, the two were married, and their union produced 3 more children. However, the volatile nature of their relationship soon became apparent. While Brent made intermittent efforts to stabilize his life for the sake of his growing family, securing a steady job at a concrete company and purchasing a modest but comfortable home in Cowpens, Angelita struggled to leave the party lifestyle behind. By 2015, after 5 years of marriage, the couple had separated, and Brent was actively pursuing a divorce, scheduled to be finalized in the coming February. He was determined to seek full custody of their 3 children, wanting to provide them with the stable, safe environment that he felt their mother could not offer in her current state. This custody battle and the impending divorce created a highly charged atmosphere of resentment and anger. The situation reached a boiling point on the day after Christmas, 2015. In an act of deeply misguided anger and digital retaliation, Brent posted highly private, compromising photographs of a woman on his Facebook page, tagging Angelita to ensure she and the entire community of Cowpens would see them. This act of public humiliation struck a devastating blow to Angelita's pride. In a small town where social standing is closely guarded, the prospect of becoming a laughingstock drove her into a state of absolute fury. Witnesses would later recall that Angelita spent the day of December 26th traveling from house to house, consuming alcohol and drugs, and showing anyone who would look the offensive social media post. Her anger was not silent. She repeatedly made explicit threats against Brent's life, declaring to multiple people that he did not deserve to breathe the same air and that she was going to go to Cowpens to end his life. Accompanying her on this volatile journey was 19-year-old Brandon Blackwood, a local youth who owned a white pickup truck. Throughout the day, the two continued to drink heavily, with Angelita's rage fueling an atmosphere of impending violence. As the night wore on, the pair ended up in the vicinity of a local gas station in Cowpens around 2:00 in the morning on December 27th. Coincidentally, Brent Tesnier was also at the station, having walked there to purchase some items after consuming alcohol himself. An alert police officer, Officer Wolf, who happened to be at the convenience store, recognized Brent and, noting his state of intoxication, kindly offered him a ride home. Confident and familiar with the road, Brent politely declined, stating that he lived only a mile away and had walked the route many times before. He set off on foot down Cemetery Street, unaware of the tragedy that awaited him in the darkness. According to the subsequent investigation and testimony, as Angelita and Brandon left the gas station, Angelita was behind the wheel of the white pickup truck. Spotting Brent walking along the shoulder of the dark, narrow road, her accumulated rage reached a critical point. She turned on the bright headlights of the truck, illuminating her estranged husband as he walked home. Rather than slowing down or passing him safely, she pressed her foot firmly on the accelerator, steering the heavy vehicle directly toward him. The impact was sudden and devastating, leaving Brent with severe internal injuries on the side of the road as the truck sped away into the night. At approximately 3:00 in the morning, passing motorists made the grim discovery of a body lying in the roadway and immediately contacted emergency services. First responders arrived quickly, and though Brent was rushed to the local emergency room, his injuries were too severe, and he passed away shortly after arrival. The initial assessment by the responding officers was uncertain. Without obvious external wounds like gunshots, it was unclear if the victim had suffered a medical emergency or had been the victim of a hit and run. However, the meticulous observation of Officer Wolf, who returned to the scene, changed the course of the investigation. She noticed tire tracks that veered sharply off the paved road and back on, and most importantly, she observed distinct tire tread marks on the victim's clothing. This physical evidence strongly suggested that Brent had been intentionally run over. As the news of Brent's death spread through the close-knit town, the community was plunged into grief. Investigators began their difficult work, initially following a tip regarding a local dispute between Brent and two brothers over a missing cell phone. The brothers had reportedly arrived at Brent's home with a weapon days earlier, creating a plausible lead. However, detectives quickly verified that the brothers had an airtight alibi, having been out of town attending a funeral at the time of the incident, and their vehicle showed no signs of damage. With the first lead cleared, the focus of the investigation shifted back to the volatile dynamics of Brent's personal life. The police received a call from a neighbor who reported seeing Angelita and her friend, Amy Paget, attempting to enter Brent's locked home shortly after his death. When questioned by officers at the scene, Angelita claimed she only wanted to retrieve Christmas gifts and personal items, and she painted a picture of an amicable relationship with her estranged husband, suggesting the police look closely at the brothers instead. Yet her behavior during a local television news interview raised immediate suspicions. While Brent's family wept, Angelita stood before the cameras with dry eyes, displaying a complete lack of genuine emotion that contrasted sharply. "They kept ite," had her earlier dramatic outbursts to the police. The turning point in the case came when a neighbor named Sherry contacted investigators. Sherry revealed that on the day before the murder, Brent had shown her the private photographs he had posted online and the barrage of threatening text messages he had received from Angelita in response, in which she explicitly threatened to travel to Cowpens and kill him. Armed with this powerful motive, detectives began searching for Angelita and her known associates, quickly identifying Brandon Blackwood and his white pickup truck. When officers located the truck parked outside the home of Brandon's grandparents, they immediately noticed fresh damage to the front bumper. Upon closer inspection, they discovered a smear that resembled biological material and a strand of hair caught on a bolt near the grill. The vehicle was impounded, and Brandon was brought in for questioning. Extremely nervous, and under the influence of substances, Brandon initially gave a detailed statement. claiming that Angelita had been driving his truck, had become enraged upon seeing Brent on the road, and had intentionally run him over despite his warnings. However, the path to justice is rarely straightforward. In a bid to prepare Brandon for his testimony at the upcoming trial, prosecutors subjected him to intense questioning. Panicking under the pressure and fearing his own liability as the owner of the vehicle, Brandon suddenly changed his story, claiming that he had been the driver and that Angelita had merely pressured him into committing the act. This unexpected confession forced authorities to arrest Brandon and put Angelita's trial on hold while they reevaluated the entire case. In subsequent interviews, a sobered Brandon recanted his second confession, explaining that his panic and substance use prior to the meeting had caused him to break down and say whatever he thought the investigators wanted to hear to end the intense questioning. To resolve the conflicting statements, investigators relied on the broader body of physical and behavioral evidence. The most compelling physical clue remained the discovery of Angelita's driver's license in the pocket of the driver's side door of Brandon's truck, a detail that placed her firmly in the driver's seat. Furthermore, a highly revealing text message sent by Angelita to Brandon less than 24 hours after the murder sealed her fate. The message, which read, "Feel like walking to the store," was interpreted by investigators and the jury as a cruel inside joke mocking the victim's final walk home, revealing a complete lack of remorse and a shocking level of calloused celebration. On November 27, 2017, the murder trial of Angelita Wright began in a South Carolina courtroom. The prosecution presented a compelling case, detailing the progression of Angelita's rage, her explicit threats, and the physical evidence linking her to the driver's side of the truck. Despite the defense's vigorous efforts to discredit Brandon Blackwood as an unreliable witness with changing stories, the jury recognized the truth hidden within the web of evidence. On November 30, 2017, the jury returned a verdict of guilty, and Angelita Wright was sentenced to 30 years in prison. The resolution of this case brought a somber sense of justice to the family of Brent Tesnier, though the pain of his absence remains a permanent scar. For his children, the tragedy represents a double loss, with their father gone and their mother incarcerated. Yet the story of Brent's life and the dedication of the investigators who solved his murder stand as a testament to the enduring power of truth and justice. It serves as a stark reminder to all communities of the devastating consequences of unchecked anger, the vital importance of resolving conflicts through peaceful means, and the necessity of supporting the legal systems that keep us safe. Through vigilance, empathy, and a commitment to the truth, we can hope to prevent such tragedies and ensure that the memory of those we lose is honored through the pursuit of a safer, more just world. In a quiet corner of upstate South Carolina, nestled within Spartanburg County, lies the small and close-knit town of Cowpens. In communities of this size, the rhythms of daily life are familiar to almost everyone who resides there, and news travels with remarkable speed. It is a place where neighbors often know one another from childhood, where families remain for generations, and where local figures can easily achieve a status akin to community legends. Among those well-known individuals was Brent Tesnier, a 36-year-old father of 6 children, and a highly talented local musician whose life was deeply rooted in the area. From a very early age, Brent had shown an extraordinary affinity for music, carrying his drumsticks with him everywhere as a young child, and eventually mastering the guitar and singing. His family home had always been a sanctuary of song, hosting festive holiday gatherings where melodies filled the air and brought people together. Despite navigating personal challenges, including struggles with substance use and the breakdown of his marriages, Brent had recently begun a determined journey towards stability. He had secured a steady job at a local concrete company, purchased a charming house of his own, and was working hard to provide a stable, loving environment for his children, even as he prepared for a final divorce hearing scheduled for the early months of the following year. The fragile peace of this small town was shattered in the early morning hours of December 27, 2015. At approximately 3 o'clock in the morning, passersby traveling along Cemetery Street made a highly alarming discovery. Lying in the dark, quiet roadway was the motionless body of a man. They immediately contacted emergency services by dialing 911, bringing local police and first responders rushing to the scene. Upon arrival, officers found no identification documents on the individual, leaving his identity temporarily shrouded in mystery. However, one observant officer on the scene experienced a sudden shock of recognition. She realized that she had seen this very man only about 1 hour earlier, at approximately 2 o'clock in the morning, at a local convenience store and gas station. While waiting in the checkout line, the officer had observed Brent Tesnier. Recognizing him as a familiar face in the community, she noticed that he appeared to be under the influence of alcohol and might be in need of assistance. Demonstrating community care, the officer had kindly offered him a ride home. Brent, however, had politely declined, reassuring her that he was fine and that his home was only about 1 mile down the road. He had walked this particular route many times before and felt entirely confident in his ability to make the short journey on foot. Initially, the circumstances surrounding Brent's condition on the road were highly ambiguous. First responders could see no obvious signs of physical violence, such as a gunshot wound or an assault, leading some on the scene to wonder if his collapse might have been the result of a sudden medical emergency, such as a heart attack, or the physical effects of intoxication in the cold night air. However, as paramedics carefully lifted Brent into the ambulance to rush him to the nearest hospital, the observing officer noticed a critical clue that changed the entire direction of the investigation. Marked clearly upon Brent's clothing were distinct tire tread impressions. It became immediately apparent that he had been struck and run over by a vehicle. Local police were left to ponder a deeply unsettling question. Was this a tragic, accidental hit-and-run collision caused by an impaired driver who panicked and fled the scene? Or was it something far more deliberate and sinister? A closer inspection of the area where Brent was found revealed tire tracks that veered sharply off the paved roadway onto the grass, only to steer back onto the road immediately afterward. The trajectory suggested that a vehicle had swerved purposefully, raising the distinct and horrifying possibility that someone had intentionally targeted Brent. Unfortunately, he did not survive the severe internal injuries and trauma he had sustained, and he passed away shortly after arriving at the emergency department. What had begun as a suspicious traffic incident was now officially being investigated as a potential homicide. As news of Brent's tragic passing began to spread through cowpens, investigators set out to build a comprehensive profile of the victim, looking for anyone who might have harbored animosity toward him. They reached out to his estranged wife, Angelita Wright, with whom he shared 3 children. When contacted by detectives, Angelita appeared to be utterly devastated, breaking down in tears and asking if her husband was going to be all right. She claimed that she had not seen Brent at Moat, all on the day leading up to his death, presenting herself as a grieving spouse, with no knowledge of what had transpired. However, the first significant lead in the case emerged the very next day, when a friend of Brent contacted 911 with an intriguing tip. The caller suggested that the incident might be connected to an escalating feud between Brent and two local brothers known as the Evans brothers. Detectives immediately contacted Brent's brother, Lucas Tesnier, to investigate this lead further. Lucas confirmed that on the day after Christmas, the Evans brothers had arrived at Brent's residence in an aggressive state, armed with a blunt object. They were looking for Brent, accusing him of stealing a mobile phone belonging to a woman associated with their family. Lucas described a tense confrontation where the brothers pounded heavily on the doors and windows, prompting Lucas to retrieve a defensive tool to protect the property. The brothers eventually departed in a large, champagne-colored sport utility vehicle. This information gave investigators a tangible lead. Two suspects with a clear motive, a history of recent conflict, and access to a large vehicle capable of causing severe physical harm. Acting quickly, detectives located the Evans brothers and inspected their champagne-colored sport utility vehicle. To the investigators' surprise, the vehicle showed absolutely no signs of front-end damage, paint transfer, or biological evidence. Furthermore, the brothers cooperated fully with the inquiry, providing a solid, verifiable alibi. They demonstrated that they had been out of town attending a funeral at the time of Brent's death. With their alibis quickly confirmed, the Evans brothers were officially cleared of any involvement, leaving investigators back at square one, searching for a new direction. During this time, Brent's family turned to the local media to plead for answers, hoping that someone in the community would come forward with information. Angelita Wright accompanied the family to the scene of the incident to speak with a television news crew. However, her behavior during the broadcast raised immediate red flags for both the family and viewers. While she did all of the speaking, onlookers noted that she displayed an unusual lack of genuine emotion, standing on the very spot where the father of her children had lost his life without shedding a single tear. Her calm, detached demeanor was in stark contrast to the intense grief she had displayed when first speaking with the police. Within 48 hours of the broadcast, a neighbor of Brent named Sherry contacted the police with crucial information that completely shifted the focus of the investigation. Sherry revealed that the relationship between Brent and Angelita was far from the amicable separation Angelita had described to detectives. According to Sherry, their marriage had been highly volatile and marked by escalating conflicts. Just one day before Brent's death, Brent had shown Sherry a social media post he had made. The post featured highly compromising private photographs of a woman, which he had tagged with Angelita's name on a popular social media platform, seemingly to embarrass and humiliate her publicly. This act of online retaliation had provoked an immediate and furious response. Sherry reported seeing text messages sent from Angelita to Brent, in which Angelita demanded that the photos be removed immediately, threatening that if he did not comply, she would travel to Cowpens and end his life. Armed with this powerful motive, investigators began to look closely at Angelita's movements on the night of the incident. They quickly discovered that Angelita did not own or drive a vehicle of her own. This raised an important question. If she had traveled to Cowpens to confront Brent, who had helped her go eat there, Rumors within the small town soon pointed detectives toward a 19-year-old local resident named Brandon Blackwood. Witnesses reported seeing Angelita and Brandon together on the evening of December 26th, traveling in Brandon S. White Ford F-150 pickup truck. Detectives proceeded to the residence of Brandon S. grandparents, where they located the white pickup truck parked outside. Upon conducting a preliminary visual inspection of the vehicle, investigators discovered highly incriminating evidence. The front bumper of the truck exhibited fresh damage, along with a dark smear that appeared to be blood and a strand of hair wrapped around a bolt on the front grille. The vehicle was immediately impounded for comprehensive forensic testing, and Brandon was brought to the Sheriff's Department for questioning. During his initial interview, Brandon was visibly shaken and nervous. He explained to detectives that he and Angelita were close friends who frequently socialized and consumed alcohol together. On the day of the incident, they had been drinking and using substances when a friend showed them the embarrassing social media post Brent had made. Upon seeing the images, Angelita had flown into a state of absolute fury, repeatedly stating that Brent did not deserve to live and that she was going to settle the score. Brandon claimed that as the night progressed and they continued to consume alcohol, Angelita took over the keys and began driving his white pickup truck. According to Brandon, his memory of the night was somewhat blurred by his heavy intoxication, but he vividly recalled stopping at a local gas station where Angelita got out of the truck to confront Brent in person. He described a heated, 15-minute argument between the estranged couple before Angelita returned to the vehicle, slammed the door, and sped off onto the dark back roads of Cowpens. A short time later, as they traveled down a dimly lit street, Brandon noticed a pedestrian walking ahead. He warned Angelita to be careful. But when she activated the high-beam headlights and realized the pedestrian was Brent, she reportedly accelerated the truck, striking him directly before driving away from the scene. When Brandon panicked and begged her to stop, she allegedly told him not to worry and assured him that Brent would be fine. Brandon admitted that he had remained silent out of fear of being implicated, as his own truck had been used in the commission of the crime. When detectives confronted Angelita with Brandon's statement, her version of events was entirely different. While she admitted to being incredibly angry about the social media post and acknowledged making threats in the heat of the moment, she insisted that her anger was merely theatrical and that she would never actually harm the father of her children. She claimed that Brandon had dropped her off at a friend's house at approximately 1 o'clock in the morning, and that she was not in the vehicle when the incident occurred. However, during her interview, she made a critical slip of the tongue. She repeatedly asserted to investigators that she had been nowhere near the scene at the exact time Brent was run over. Detectives immediately picked up on this anomaly, pointing out that the police had not yet publicly released the estimated time of Brent's death. When asked how she could possibly know the precise timing of the incident if she had not been present, Angelita fell silent, unable to provide an explanation. Further physical evidence soon came to light when forensic technicians searched the impounded pickup truck. Inside the driver's side door pocket, investigators discovered Angelita's official identification card. This discovery was highly significant, as there was no logical reason for her identification card to be resting in the driver's side door pocket of a vehicle she did not own, unless she had been occupying the driver's seat. Based on the strength of the circumstantial evidence, the incriminating timeline, and Brandon S. eyewitness statement. Angelita Wright was officially arrested and charged with murder on December 31st, 2015. However, as the prosecution prepared the case for trial, the investigation hit a series of unexpected hurdles. First, the laboratory results for the biological evidence recovered from the front bumper of the truck returned as inconclusive. The outdoor exposure of the vehicle to weather and rain had degraded the samples, meaning there was no definitive scientific match to link the vehicle directly to Brent S. DNA. This meant the State S case would rely heavily on the live testimony of Brandon Blackwood. To prepare him for the trial, prosecutors brought Brandon in for a mock cross-examination. Under intense questioning from the legal team, Brandon grew extremely anxious and fidgety. When pressed about his level of involvement, his narrative suddenly collapsed, and he delivered a shocking new confession. He claimed that he, not Angelita, had actually been the one driving the truck, and that Angelita had sat in the passenger seat, repeatedly urging him to run Brent down. Faced with this sudden and dramatic change in the star witness story, authorities had no choice but to arrest Brandon as well, charging him in connection with the crime while they worked to determine which of his statements was the truth. The entire prosecution was thrown into temporary disarray, and Angelita's trial was postponed. A week later, a sobered and remorseful, Brandon requested another interview with detectives. He explained that before his preparation meeting with the prosecutors, his extreme anxiety had led him to consume illegal substances, which severely impaired his cognitive functions. Under the intense pressure of the interrogation, he had simply broken down and said whatever he believed the authorities wanted to hear in order to make the questioning stop. He adamantly recanted his second confession, insisting that his original statement was the absolute truth. Angelita had been behind the wheel, driven by a desire for revenge, while he had merely been an intoxicated passenger. To verify his claims, Brandon agreed to undergo a polygraph examination. While the test indicated some deception regarding the full extent of his own passive involvement, it confirmed that he was telling the truth when he asserted that Angelita was indeed the driver who struck Brent. Despite the complexities and risks associated with Brandon S. changing statements, the prosecution decided to proceed to trial, confident that the collective weight of the evidence would lead to a conviction. The trial of Angelita Wright commenced on November 27, 2017. The prosecution presented a compelling narrative of a woman consumed by anger, driven to an extreme act of violence by a combination of a volatile pending divorce, a custody dispute over their children, and the public humiliation of the compromise social media post. They presented the critical digital evidence, including the threatening text messages Angelita had sent to Brent just hours before his death. Most damaging of all was a text message Angelita had sent to Brandon less than 24 hours after the incident. In the message, she casually wrote that she felt like walking to the store, followed by the acronym for laughing out loud. The prosecution argued that this message was a cruel inside joke, referencing the fact that Brent had been walking home from a convenience store when he was struck down. The defense focused heavily on discrediting Brandon, pointing out his shifting stories and arguing that his admitted intoxication and changing confessions created a reasonable doubt as to who was actually driving the vehicle. After careful deliberation, the jury rejected the defense arguments. On November 30, 2017, Angelita Wright was found guilty of murder. The judge sentenced her to 30 years in prison. Throughout the proceedings, observers noted that Angelita showed no remorse for the loss of Brent's life, displaying emotion only when realizing the severity of her own sentence. For Brent's family and his 6 children, the verdict brought a solemn sense of justice, though it could never fully heal the profound void left by his absence. The tragic case of Brent Tesnier serves as a somber reminder of the devastating consequences of unresolved anger, domestic hostility, and the dangerous escalation of personal grievances. It highlights the vital importance of seeking peaceful, legal avenues to resolve family disputes and the necessity of community vigilance in preventing such heartrending outcomes. Good ultimately triumphed as justice was served, leaving a legacy of warning and a call for greater empathy and restraint in human relationships. The human heart is capable of remarkable creativity, devotion, and love, yet it can also become a vessel for volatile emotions when domestic friction is left to fester without intervention. In the quiet corners of our communities, where life seems to move at a gentler pace, the sudden eruption of violence within a relationship often leaves a trail of profound bewilderment. Understanding the intricate psychological and social dynamics of these tragedies is essential if we are to draw meaningful lessons from them. When intimate partnerships degrade into bitterness, the introduction of substance abuse, custody disputes, and public embarrassment can create a highly unstable environment. In small, close-knit towns, where everyone is acquainted and personal histories are deeply intertwined, these conflicts are rarely private. Instead, they are amplified by the surrounding social web, transforming personal grievances into public spectacles. This lack of anonymity can act as an accelerant, driving individuals who feel scorned or humiliated to make catastrophic choices that forever shatter multiple families. To understand why these tragic cases occur with such frequency, one must examine the intersection of human pride, unresolved relationship trauma, and the modern digital landscape. Marriage and long-term partnerships involve deep emotional investments, and when they fail, the resulting sense of rejection can be overwhelming. For some individuals, this rejection is not met with grief or acceptance, but with an intense desire for control and retaliation. When one party attempts to rebuild their life, establish boundaries, or seek custody of children, the other may perceive this progress as a direct threat to their ego. This volatile dynamic is often worsened by the misuse of social media platforms, which have unfortunately become digital battlegrounds for domestic disputes. The act of sharing private, sensitive, or embarrassing materials online is a particularly destructive form of retaliation that strips away any remaining mutual respect. Such public shaming can trigger an immediate, irrational rage in a person who is already struggling. Vekeptahat, emotional instability, leading them to believe that physical violence is the only way to reclaim their pride or silence their partner. In navigating the aftermath of jhene events, the investigating forces must demonstrate immense patience, analytical rigor, and empathy. When a tragedy occurs under the cover of darkness on a quiet street, the initial scene can be highly deceptive. What might at first glance appear to be a tragic, accidental traffic incident can slowly reveal itself to be a calculated act of violence. Investigators must remain objective, refusing to accept the easiest explanation until every piece of physical and circumstantial evidence has been meticulously evaluated. In a small town, the initial phase of an investigation is often complicated by a flurry of rumors, historical family feuds, and false leads. Well-meaning citizens and protective family members may point detectives toward long-standing disputes, creating distractions that require swift and careful elimination. The true measure of an investigative team lies in their ability to separate local gossip from verified facts, systematically clearing innocent suspects while keeping an open mind about those who hide in plain sight. The physical clues left behind at a crime scene serve as silent witnesses to the truth, and their analysis requires a high degree of forensic expertise. Tire marks left on a roadway, debris scattered near a curb, and even the subtle patterns transferred onto a victim's clothing can tell a detailed story of speed, direction, and intent. When a vehicle veers off a paved road, the geometry of the tire tracks can indicate whether the driver lost control accidentally or made a deliberate decision to target a pedestrian. In the modern era, these traditional forensic techniques are bolstered by digital evidence, which has become the cornerstone of successful prosecutions. The digital footprint left by individuals in the hours leading up to and following a crime is nearly impossible to erase. Cell phone tower mapping, internet search histories, social media timestamps, and text message archives provide an unvarnished, objective chronology of events that no witness or suspect can successfully dispute. There is a mild irony in the behavior of individuals who attempt to commit what they believe to be a clever or undetectable crime. Popular fiction often portrays criminals as highly sophisticated, calculating masterminds who anticipate every variable. In reality, most acts of domestic violence are characterized by impulsivity, disorganization, and an almost baffling level of self-sabotage. The perpetrators in these cases are frequently blinded by their own immediate anger, failing to realize that their actions leave a massive trail of evidence. They may use vehicles that are easily identifiable, leave their personal identification documents inside the very vehicle used to commit the offense, or make explicit, written threats on digital platforms just hours prior to the event. Perhaps most astonishing is the tendency of such individuals to celebrate or joke about their actions through text messages shortly after the crime, apparently under the impression that their private communications are beyond the reach of forensic analysts. This profound lack of foresight highlights the triumph of modern science and investigative methodology over disorganized criminal intent. Drawing life lessons from these tragic occurrences is vital for the protection and well-being of our families and communities. The first and most critical lesson is the absolute necessity of conflict resolution and the healthy management of anger. When a relationship reaches a point of high volatility, it is imperative for individuals to seek external support, whether through professional counseling, legal mediation, or community support groups. Attempting to resolve deep-seated personal disputes through retaliation, public humiliation, or digital warfare only serves to escalate the danger. Furthermore, we must foster a culture of respect and digital hygiene, recognizing that the weaponization of personal data and photographs is a severe boundary violation that can have lethal consequences. Communities must also establish robust safety nets to identify families in crisis, offering early intervention programs that can help diffuse volatile situations before they erupt into physical violence. For law enforcement agencies, the key to catching perpetrators faster and securing justice lies in the integration of modern technology with traditional community-oriented policing. When a hit and run or a suspicious pedestrian death occurs, time is of the essence. Investigators can accelerate their progress by immediately securing all localized video surveillance, utilizing automated license plate readers, and performing swift digital sweeps of the victim's social media accounts and recent communications. Simultaneously, maintaining strong, trusting relationships with community members allows detectives to quickly gather tips that might otherwise take days to surface. Isolating key witnesses early in the process is equally crucial, as it prevents the contamination of narratives and reduces the likelihood of false confessions or story alignment among co-conspirators. By combining rapid forensic mobilization with a deep understanding of local social dynamics, investigators can quickly narrow their focus and bring clarity to even the most chaotic situations. Let us carry our minds back to the chilly post-holiday season of the year 2015 in the small, picturesque town of Cowpens, South Carolina. Cowpens is the kind of place where generations of families have lived side by side, where the rhythm of life is slow, and where nearly every resident is acquainted with their neighbor. In this close-knit community, a man named Brent Tesnier was a familiar and beloved figure. Born in mid-January of the year 1979 in the nearby city of Spartanburg, Brent was a man whose entire existence was deeply intertwined with the power of music. From the time he was a small child of just 4 years old, when he received his very first set of drumsticks, his passion was unmistakable. He would carry those drumsticks everywhere he went, drumming on any surface he could find, his eyes shining with the joy of rhythm. As he grew into his teenage years, his talent expanded, and he began to master the guitar, develop his singing voice, and write his own original compositions. Brent was a regular on the local music circuit, a charismatic performer who felt most at peace when he was sharing his art with others. However, like many creative souls, his journey was not without its shadows. The late-night lifestyle of a working musician in a small town brought with it temptations, and Brent struggled periodically with substance abuse and the wilder side of the party scene. Despite these personal demons, he was blessed with the support of his high school sweetheart, Jennifer Bragg. The young couple's lives changed profoundly when they welcomed their first daughter during their teenage years, an event that deeply moved Brent and inspired him to seek a higher path. In the year 1999, at the age of 20, Brent and Jennifer were married, and for a time, Brent turned away from the nightlife to focus on faith and family. He attended school to become a preacher, finding a deep sense of tranquility and purpose when he was serving his congregation and sharing a message of hope. Over the next decade, Brent and Jennifer welcomed 2 more children into their lives. To support his growing family, Brent worked tirelessly, taking on construction jobs and any music gigs that would help provide for his household. He was a dedicated provider, but the draw of the local music scene and the late-night hours eventually placed an unsustainable strain on his marriage. After 10 years together, Brent and Jennifer made the difficult decision to divorce, and Brent found himself drifting back toward the wild social lifestyle he had previously left behind. It was during this period of transition that he reconnected with Angelita Wright, a childhood friend who had grown up living right next door to his family. Angelita had always held a fond affection for Brent, and she easily fit into his active social lifestyle. She was a constant presence at his performances, supportive of his musical dreams, and always ready to join in the celebrations. Within a couple of years, the two were married, and they eventually welcomed 3 children of their own. However, the volatile nature of their shared lifestyle soon began to take a toll on their union. While Brent reached a point where he sincerely wished to stabilize his life and provide a quiet, secure environment for his children, Angelita struggled to leave the party scene behind. Realizing that they were moving in completely opposite directions, the couple separated, though they endeavored to co-parent their 3 young children as best they could. By the year 2015, Brent was 36 years old, a father of 6, and was actively preparing for a formal divorce to establish stable custody arrangements. He had taken significant steps toward a healthier, more structured life, purchasing a charming and simple house in Cowpens, securing a reliable full-time position at a local concrete company, and continuing to write and post his original music online. He was proud of his progress, sharing with his children that everything was going to be all right, and that they would build a peaceful future together in their new home. Yet, this promising new chapter was tragically cut short in the early morning hours of December 20, 2015. At approximately 2 in the morning, a local police officer, who was well acquainted with the residents of Cowpens, observed Brent at a convenience store. Noting that he appeared to have been socializing and might be under the influence of alcohol, she kindly offered to drive him home to ensure his safety. Brent, maintaining his polite and independent nature, declined her offer with a smile, explaining that his new home was less than a mile down the road, and that he had walked the route safely many times before. Regrettably, that would be the last friendly conversation Brent would ever have. Just before 3 in the morning, passersby on Cemetery Street made an alarming discovery, spotting a motionless body lying on the darkened roadway. They immediately contacted emergency services, and first responders rushed to the scene. When the police arrived, they found a man with no identification on his person, but the responding officer quickly recognized him as the same individual she had spoken with at the convenience store just an hour earlier. It was Brent Tesnier. Paramedics performed life-saving measures and rushed him to the nearby emergency room, but his injuries were too severe, and he passed away shortly after arrival. Initially, because there were no obvious external wounds, such as a gunshot or a physical altercation, investigators considered the possibility that Brent had suffered a sudden medical episode, perhaps exacerbated by the cold night air and alcohol consumption. However, as the medical team moved him, the officer noticed distinct, dark tire tread marks on his clothing. This crucial observation transformed the scene completely. Right near the location where Brent had been found, investigators discovered tire tracks that veered sharply off the paved road and then returned to the asphalt, suggesting that a vehicle had deliberately swerved to strike him. The police immediately launched a potential homicide investigation, seeking to piece together Brent's final hours. The news of his death sent shockwaves through the quiet town of Cowpens, and investigators began contacting his family to deliver the devastating news. When they reached Angelita Wright, she appeared to be overcome with extreme grief, weeping openly and stating that she had not seen her estranged husband all day. With no immediate suspects, the police began tracing Brent's recent interactions, and a tip soon pointed them toward a local dispute involving 2 brothers known in the community as the Evans brothers. A friend of Brent's reported that on the day before the tragedy, the brothers had arrived at Brent's family home, carrying a blunt object, aggressively demanding the return of a missing cell phone they believed Brent had taken. The brothers drove a large, champagne-colored sport utility vehicle, which investigators realized was certainly capable of causing the severe internal trauma that Brent had suffered. Detectives located the Evans brothers at their residence, noting their champagne-colored vehicle parked outside. Upon closer inspection, The vehicle showed absolutely no signs of damage, and the brothers were highly cooperative with the inquiry. They admitted they had been angry about the missing phone, but adamantly denied any involvement in Brent's death, presenting a solid, verifiable alibi that placed them out of town at a family funeral during the hours the incident occurred. With the Evans brothers cleared, investigators had to search for a new direction. Meanwhile, a neighbor of Brent S., named Sherry, contacted the police after watching a local television broadcast about the tragedy. Sherry revealed a far more personal and volatile motive. She explained that on December 26th, she had visited Brent, and he had shown her a social media post he had recently created. In an attempt to embarrass Angelita amid their custody dispute, Brent had posted explicit photographs online, tagging Angelita to ensure her friends and family would see them. This act of digital retaliation had provoked a furious response. Sherry stated that Brent had shown her a series of text messages from Angelita in which she expressed intense rage over the public embarrassment, demanding that the photographs be removed immediately and threatening to end his life if he did not comply. Armed with this critical information, investigators began to look more closely at Angelita's actions. They soon discovered that despite her display of overwhelming grief to the police, her behavior in public was remarkably different. During a local television news interview at the scene of the incident, she appeared dry-eyed, detached, and remarkably composed, doing all the talking for the grieving family while showing very little genuine emotion. Furthermore, neighbors reported seeing Angelita attempting to break into Brent S.'s secured home shortly after his death, claiming she was merely trying to retrieve Christmas gifts and personal items, though investigators suspected she may have been searching for the cell phone containing her threatening messages. Because Angelita did not own a vehicle, investigators began to inquire about who might have assisted her on the night of the crime. Word in the community quickly directed them to 19-year-old Brandon Blackwood, a young associate of Angelita S., who owned a white pickup truck. When detectives went to Brandon's grandparents' residence, they located the white Ford F-150 pickup truck and immediately noticed fresh damage to the front bumper. Upon closer inspection, they observed a substance that resembled blood and several strands of hair caught in a bolt near the front of the vehicle. Brandon was brought to the sheriff's office for questioning. Under interrogation, he admitted that he and Angelita had been together all day on December 26th, consuming alcohol and other substances. He described how they had visited a friend who showed them Brent's explicit social media post, which sent Angelita into a spiral of intense rage. Brandon claimed that Angelita took the keys to his truck, drove them around the area while repeatedly threatening to kill Brent, and eventually spotted him walking along the side of Cemetery Street. According to Brandon S.'s initial statement, Angelita illuminated the high beams, confirmed it was Brent, accelerated the vehicle, and ran him over before driving away. The investigation took a significant step forward when detectives searched Brandon S.'s truck and discovered Angelita S.'s driver S license inside the pocket of the driver S side door, suggesting she had indeed been operating the vehicle. Angelita was arrested and charged with murder, while Brandon was initially treated as a key witness. However, as the trial date approached, the prosecution's case faced a sudden and dramatic challenge. During a standard trial preparation meeting, prosecutors questioned Brandon intensely, searching for any inconsistencies in his narrative. Overwhelmed by anxiety and under the influence of substances he had consumed to calm his nerves, Brandon broke down and gave a completely different statement, claiming that he had actually been the driver and that Angelita had merely urged him to strike Brent from the passenger seat. This sudden confession forced the authorities to arrest Brandon as well, throw the case into temporary disarray, and postpone Angelita's trial while they re-evaluated the evidence. A week later, a sobered and calmer Brandon recanted his confession, explaining that when he was subjected to intense pressure, he would say whatever he believed the authorities wanted to hear, simply to escape the situation. He maintained that his original statement was the absolute truth and that Angelita was indeed the person behind the wheel. To verify his claims, investigators administered a polygraph test. While the test indicated deception, when Brandon spoke of his own complete lack of involvement, it confirmed he was telling the truth when he stated that Angelita was in the vehicle and was the driver who directed the truck toward Brent. Understanding that polygraph results are inadmissible in a court of law, and recognizing the inherent volatility of Brandon's statements, the prosecution realized they faced a significant risk. However, they chose to proceed with the trial, confident that the combination of Angelita's threatening text messages, the presence of her driver's license in the driver's side door, and the timeline of events would convince a jury of her guilt. In November of the year 2017, the trial of Angelita Wright commenced in South Carolina. The prosecution presented a powerful narrative of a woman pushed to the brink by a pending divorce, a custody battle, and a deeply humiliating public social media post. They argued that her anger had boiled over into a deliberate act of vengeance. The defense fought vigorously, attempting to create reasonable doubt by highlighting Brandon Blackwood's changing statements and portraying him as an unreliable witness who would say anything to protect himself. However, the prosecution presented a final devastating piece of evidence: a text message sent by Angelita to Brandon less than 24 hours after Brent's death. In the message, she casually wrote that she felt like walking to the store, followed by an acronym indicating laughter. The prosecution successfully argued to the jury that this message was a cruel, private celebration of the crime, mocking the fact that Brent had been struck while walking home from the convenience store. The jury deliberated and returned a verdict of guilty of murder. Angelita Wright was sentenced to 30 years in state prison, showing no remorse for the loss of the father of her children, but only concern for her own fate. For the family of Brent Tesnier, the verdict brought a sense of justice, though it could never truly heal the profound void left by his absence. His children faced the heartbreaking reality of losing one parent to a senseless act of violence and another to a lengthy prison sentence. Yet, amid the grief, the memory of Brent as a devoted father, a talented musician, and a man who sought to better himself remains a source of inspiration for his loved ones. The story of Cowpens serves as a powerful, enduring reminder of the importance of addressing domestic conflict with peace, seeking support in times of crisis, and honoring the tireless efforts of the justice system in bringing the truth to light. The intricate web of human emotions often contains threads of affection, jealousy, and anger, which, when left unguided by reason, can spiral into tragic outcomes. In small communities where everyone is familiar with one another, the impact of a single life lost is felt deeply by every resident, echoing through the quiet streets and leaving a lasting mark on the local history. The case of a small-town musician in upstate South Carolina presents a profound study of how personal disputes, fueled by substance abuse and amplified by digital platforms, can escalate into irreversible harm. To understand why such occurrences are not isolated incidents, but rather part of a broader societal pattern, one must examine the psychological mechanisms of revenge and the ways in which unresolved domestic tensions find an outlet in destructive acts. Domestic disputes and relationship dissolutions frequently serve as the background for severe conflicts. When a partnership ends, the emotional toll can manifest as a desire for control or retaliation. In many such instances, individuals experience a sense of rejection that they struggle to process constructively. When digital communication is introduced into this volatile mix, the potential for escalation increases significantly. The practice of sharing private, compromising photographs of a former partner as a form of social retaliation, often referred to as the retributive distribution of intimate images, represents a modern mechanism of emotional warfare. This act is designed to inflict maximum social and psychological damage, stripping the other person of their dignity and standing in the community. When one party uses this highly damaging tactic, the resulting humiliation can trigger an intense, irrational desire for immediate vengeance in the other, overriding basic moral constraints and leading to physical confrontation. When analyzing the details of how the investigating authorities track down perpetrators in complex cases, it becomes clear that meticulous observation and the collection of objective physical evidence are paramount. In the early stages of an inquiry, investigators must remain open to all possibilities, avoiding the temptation to settle on the first logical theory. In this particular case, the initial discovery of a body on a quiet street in the early hours of the morning presented several potential scenarios, ranging from a natural medical event to an accidental collision. The critical clue that redirected the focus of the investigation was the careful observation of tire impressions on the clothing of the deceased. This physical evidence immediately suggested a vehicular impact and prompted a thorough search for a corresponding vehicle. Additionally, the presence of tire tracks that veered off the road and then returned to the pavement indicated that the collision may not have been a simple accident, but rather a deliberate act. The tracking process relies heavily on a combination of community cooperation, forensic science, and digital evidence. A vital aspect of modern law enforcement is the analysis of communication patterns. The perpetrator, driven by a false sense of security, often leaves a trail of digital footprints, including text messages expressing hostility and social media activity that establishes a clear timeline and motive. In this case, the discovery of highly hostile messages sent prior to the event provided a critical link between the suspect and the victim. Furthermore, the physical inspection of suspected vehicles is a cornerstone of traffic collision investigations. Even when direct biological evidence on the exterior of a vehicle is inconclusive due to environmental factors such as weather or road conditions, secondary clues can be highly revealing. The discovery of personal belongings, such as an identification document belonging to a suspect in a specific compartment of a vehicle, can provide powerful circumstantial evidence of who was occupying and operating the vehicle at the critical time. A fascinating element of many criminal investigations is the contrast between the perceived cleverness of the perpetrators and the actual transparency of their actions. There is often a mild irony in the loopholes and errors that individuals make when trying to evade responsibility. Perpetrators frequently construct elaborate alibis or attempt to deflect suspicion toward other individuals who may have had unrelated disagreements with the victim. In this instance, the attempt to direct the attention of the authorities toward local brothers who had a minor dispute over a missing cellular device demonstrated a common diversionary tactic. However, such deflections are easily dismantled when investigators systematically verify alibis through independent witnesses and objective documentation. Another logical loophole is the inability of a suspect to maintain a consistent emotional response. A perpetrator may exhibit extreme distress during initial contact with law enforcement, yet appear strangely detached or unemotional when interacting with the community or the media shortly thereafter. This inconsistency often serves as a red flag for experienced investigators, signaling that the individual may be concealing their true involvement. Moreover, the psychological phenomenon of a false confession or shifting narratives often complicates the path to justice, yet ultimately highlights the sophistication of modern interrogative techniques. When an accomplice or a witness provides multiple conflicting accounts of an event, changing their role from a passive passenger to the active driver, investigators must look beyond the spoken word to the physical and circumstantial realities. The use of specialized tools, such as forensic mapping of cellular tower signals, allows authorities to place individuals at specific locations at precise times, independent of their verbal assertions. This scientific approach ensures that the truth can be established even when human memory is clouded by substance use or distorted by the fear of legal consequences. The final resolution of ATU Shehat cases often hinges on presenting a cohesive narrative to a jury, demonstrating how physical evidence, digital communications, and witness testimonies align to exclude all reasonable alternative explanations. Reflecting on these events allows communities to draw profound life lessons aimed at preventing similar tragedies. One of the most significant lessons is the critical importance of conflict resolution and emotional regulation. When personal relationships deteriorate, individuals must seek constructive avenues for support, such as counseling, legal mediation, or family services, rather than allowing anger to govern their actions. The use of digital platforms to publicize personal grievances or to humiliate others is a highly destructive practice that inevitably escalates tension. Maintaining personal boundaries and choosing to walk away from volatile situations can save lives. Additionally, the broader community plays a vital role in identifying signs of domestic distress and encouraging individuals to seek help before disagreements escalate into physical violence. Supporting the children who are left behind in the wake of such tragedies is a collective responsibility, reminding us of the enduring human cost of unchecked anger. For law enforcement agencies, the continuous improvement of investigative techniques is essential for bringing swift resolution to complex cases. Sharing experiences across jurisdictions helps refine the methods used to gather and preserve evidence. One key recommendation is the rapid implementation of a multidisciplinary approach at the very beginning of an investigation, combining the efforts of patrol officers, traffic reconstruction experts, digital forensic analysts, and community liaisons ensures that no critical detail is overlooked. Furthermore, the preservation of the crime scene and the immediate securing of nearby surveillance footage from local businesses or residential areas can provide invaluable visual evidence before it is lost or overwritten. Enhancing the training of officers in recognizing the psychological nuances of witness interviews and the factors that contribute to inconsistent statements can also expedite the process of identifying the true perpetrator. Let us now examine the chronological events of this case in extensive detail. beginning with the vibrant life of the victim and concluding with the judicial resolution that sought to restore balance to the community. Brent Tesnier was born on January 14, 1979, in the city of Spartanburg, South Carolina. From his earliest years, his life was deeply intertwined with the rich musical traditions of his family. The Tesnier household was a gathering place where holidays and everyday moments were celebrated, vekep, aite, hatsong, and music was the language through which they expressed their deepest emotions. By the tender age of 4, Brent had received his first set of drums, and he could often be seen carrying his drumsticks with him wherever he went, tapping out rhythms on any available surface. As he grew into adolescence, his musical talents expanded to include singing and playing the guitar, and he quickly became a familiar figure on the local music circuit in upstate South Carolina. Despite his immense talent, Brent faced the challenges that often accompany a creative and free-spirited lifestyle. As a teenager, the allure of the local nightlife and the social scene led him to make choices that diverted his attention from formal education. He departed from his studies early, choosing instead to fully immerse himself in the world of musical performances and the accompanying celebrations. This lifestyle introduced him to personal struggles, including issues with substance use, which would persist as recurring obstacles throughout his life. However, throughout these turbulent years, he was supported by his high school sweetheart, Jennifer Bragg. The couple experienced a profound turning point when they welcomed their first daughter during their teenage years, an event that deeply moved Brent and inspired him to seek a more stable and faith-based path. In the year 1999, at the age of 20, Brent and Jennifer were united in marriage. Seeking to distance himself from the destructive elements of his past, Brent turned his attention toward faith and community service, pursuing studies to become a local preacher. For a period, this spiritual focus brought a sense of peace and purpose to his life, and he worked diligently to provide for his expanding family, taking on construction jobs and participating in paid musical performances. Together, Brent and Jennifer welcomed 2 more children into their home, and to those who knew them, they appeared to be a devoted couple. Yet, the persistent temptations of the music scene and the demanding hours of late-night gigs eventually began to strain the marriage. After a decade of shared life, the couple made the difficult decision to divorce, a transition that marked another significant shift in Brent's personal journey. Following the dissolution of his first marriage, Brent returned to a more active social life, eventually reconnecting with a childhood acquaintance, Angelita Wright. Angelita had grown up in close proximity to the Tesnier family, sharing many of the same small-town experiences and challenges. Her own upbringing had been marked by significant family tragedy, having lost her mother to violence and seeing her father enter the correctional system, which left her to be raised by her grandparents. This shared background of struggle and resilience created an immediate, powerful bond between Brent and Angelita. They quickly became inseparable, with Angelita offering enthusiastic support for Brent's musical endeavors. Within a short period, the couple married and subsequently welcomed 3 children of their own, further expanding Brent's role as a father. However, the pattern of marital instability and personal struggles reemerged, and after 5 years of marriage, Brent and Angelita decided to separate. Despite their decision to live apart, they made a conscious effort to cooperate in raising their children, maintaining a civil relationship for the sake of their family. By the year 2015, Brent was a 36-year-old father of 6 children, working a stable job at a concrete company and residing in a modest, welcoming home in the town of Cowpens. He had begun to establish a healthier balance in his life, focusing on his children and continuing to share his music through digital platforms. He was preparing for the finalization of his divorce, which was scheduled for the upcoming spring, and there was a widespread sense among his family that he was making genuine progress toward a bright and stable future. This promising chapter was abruptly cut short in the early hours of December 27, 2015. At approximately 3 in the morning, individuals passing through Cemetery Street in Cowpens made a startling discovery, spotting what appeared to be an unresponsive person lying in the roadway. They immediately contacted emergency services. Upon arriving at the scene, first responders found a male individual who possessed no identification documents. However, a local police officer on the scene recognized the man as Brent Tesnier, having observed him approximately 1 hour earlier at a nearby convenience store. At that time, she had noticed he appeared to be under the influence of alcohol and had kindly offered him a ride home, which he had politely declined, asserting that his residence was only a short distance away and that he was accustomed to walking the route. Initially, the cause of Brent's unresponsive state was not entirely clear, as there were no obvious external signs of physical trauma such as wounds from a weapon. It was initially considered that he might have experienced a sudden medical crisis due to environmental exposure or personal health conditions. However, as medical personnel prepared him for transport to the hospital, a critical piece of evidence was observed. Distinct tire tread impressions were visible on his clothing. This finding strongly suggested that he had been struck by a motor vehicle. A further examination of the surrounding area revealed tire tracks, indicating that a vehicle had veered off the paved road and subsequently returned to it, raising the disturbing possibility that the driver had intentionally directed the vehicle toward the pedestrian. Despite the life-saving efforts of medical professionals, Brent was pronounced deceased shortly after his arrival at the emergency facility, with internal injuries and bleeding consistent with a severe vehicular impact. The local police immediately initiated a potential homicide investigation, seeking to reconstruct the events of that fateful night. When investigators contacted Angelita Wright to inform her of the tragedy, she appeared overwhelmed with emotion, claiming she had not seen her husband at all during the preceding hours. With no immediate eyewitnesses or clear physical evidence from the scene, the authorities faced a challenging task in identifying the individual responsible for the collision. The breakthrough in the investigation began the following day, when a close associate of the family contacted emergency services, suggesting that the incident might be connected to an ongoing dispute between Brent and 2 local brothers. According to this informant, the brothers had arrived at Brent's residence a day prior, brandishing a blunt instrument and demanding the return of a cellular telephone they believed had been taken. Brent's brother, Lucas, confirmed this confrontation, describing an aggressive encounter where the individuals had attempted to gain entry to the home before departing in a large champagne-colored utility vehicle. Given the physical forces required to inflict the fatal injuries, this description of a large vehicle and a clear motive made the brothers primary suspects. However, when investigators located the brothers and inspected their vehicle, they found no signs of physical damage or evidence of a collision. Furthermore, the brothers cooperated fully with the authorities, providing a verified alibi that placed them at a family gathering a significant distance away at the time of the incident. This discovery forced the investigation to shift its focus, seeking new leads from the community. In the meantime, Brent S. family, accompanied by Angelita, participated in a local media appeal, pleading for information regarding the hit and run. Observers noted that while Angelita spoke on behalf of the family, her demeanor appeared unusually reserved and lacking in visible grief, presenting a sharp contrast to her initial emotional reaction when first notified by the police. Suspicion began to center on Angelita after a neighbor contacted the authorities to report a significant conflict that had occurred between the couple immediately prior to the tragedy. According to this witness, Brent had recently shared a highly compromising personal photograph of an individual on social media, tagging Angelita in the post as an act of public humiliation. This retaliatory sharing of intimate imagery had provoked an intense reaction from Angelita, who had sent several highly hostile text messages demanding the immediate removal of the post and making explicit threats of physical harm. Family members also recalled that on the evening before the incident, Angelita had appeared at a relative's home in an extremely agitated state, demanding that Brent be contacted regarding the social media post. As investigators sought to determine how Angelita could have carried out the act without possessing a personal vehicle, they received information linking her to an associate named Brandon Blackwood. Witnesses reported seeing Angelita in the company of Brandon throughout the evening of December 26th, traveling in his white pickup truck. When officers located the vehicle outside a local residence, they observed notable damage to the front bumper, along with a substance that appeared to warrant forensic testing, and a small strand of hair caught in a mounting bolt. The vehicle was immediately impounded for scientific analysis, and Brandon was invited to provide a statement to the authorities. During his interview, the 19-year-old Brandon described a close friendship with Angelita, admitting they had spent the day consuming alcoholic beverages and visiting various acquaintances. He recalled that after learning of the highly embarrassing social media post, Angelita's anger had intensified significantly, and she had expressed a desire to confront her husband directly. Brandon claimed that as the evening progressed, Angelita had assumed control of the vehicle. He stated that while traveling along the dark roads of Cowpens, he had observed a figure walking along the roadside and had cautioned the driver. According to his account, Angelita had illuminated the high-beam headlights, recognized her husband, and accelerated the vehicle directly toward him, fleeing the scene immediately afterward. When confronted with this narrative, Angelita strongly denied any involvement in the incident, claiming that Brandon had departed in the vehicle hours before the collision occurred. However, investigators noted a critical flaw in her statement. She referenced the specific time of the incident before that information had been publicly disclosed, suggesting first-hand knowledge of the event. Furthermore, a search of the impounded vehicle revealed Angelita's identification document located in the pocket of the driver's side door, a location highly inconsistent with her claim of never having operated the truck. On December 31, 2015, Angelita was placed under arrest and charged with the crime. The legal proceedings took an unexpected turn during the trial preparation process. When prosecutors met with Brandon to review his testimony, his high level of anxiety led to further questioning. Under intense scrutiny, Brandon suddenly altered his account, claiming that he had been the individual operating the vehicle while Angelita urged him to proceed. This unexpected confession threatened to compromise the prosecution's case, leading to Brandon's arrest and a temporary postponement of the trial. However, upon further investigation, Brandon recanted this second statement, explaining that his anxiety and the consumption of personal substances prior to the meeting had led him to provide a false confession in an attempt to conclude the stressful interview. He reaffirmed his original account, and a subsequent polygraph examination indicated truthfulness regarding Angelita's presence and active role in the vehicle. The trial commenced on November 27, 2017, in Spartanburg County. The prosecution presented a detailed case, illustrating how a combination of marital discord, the impending divorce, and the public humiliation of the social media post had culminated in a deliberate act of violence. They relied heavily on the digital evidence, including the hostile text messages sent by Angelita, as well as a highly unusual text message she sent to Brandon less than 24 hours after the incident, which made a casual, joking reference to walking to a store. The prosecution argued that this message served as an inside reference to the circumstances of Brent's death, demonstrating a lack of remorse. Despite the defense efforts to discredit Brandon's testimony by highlighting his inconsistent statements, the jury was persuaded by the cohesive presentation of physical and circumstantial evidence, including the placement of Angelita's identification in the driver's side door. On November 30, 2017, the jury returned a verdict of guilty, and Angelita was sentenced to 30 years of incarceration. The resolution of the case brought a sense of closure to the community and the family, though the loss of a talented father and musician continues to be felt. The tragedy serves as a solemn reminder of the devastating consequences of unresolved anger and the enduring power of justice in seeking the truth. In the quiet and close-knit community of Cowpens, South Carolina, life typically moves at a peaceful and predictable pace. In a small town where everyone knows their neighbors, families have lived for generations, and daily interactions are built on decades of shared history. Personal relationships form the very fabric of existence. However, when these intimate bonds are fractured by unresolved anger, jealousy, and the modern complexities of digital communication, the consequences can be devastating. To understand why such tragic cases occur with alarming frequency in society today, we must examine the psychological motives that drive individuals to commit extreme acts of violence. At the heart of many such tragedies is the destructive cycle of revenge, often amplified by substance abuse and a lack of emotional coping mechanisms. In the modern era, personal conflicts are no longer confined to private spaces. The rise of social media has introduced a dangerous element where private disputes can be publicized instantly, causing deep humiliation and resentment. When an individual feels that their reputation has been destroyed in a small community where social standing is highly valued, the psychological impact can trigger a powerful desire for retaliation. This modern phenomenon, often referred to as digital harassment or revenge publications, acts as a modern catalyst for real-world violence. The perpetrators in these cases are rarely criminal masterminds. Rather, they are individuals driven by impulsive rage who fail to consider the legal, moral, or physical consequences of their actions. The frequent occurrence of these cases highlights a growing need in society for better conflict resolution strategies, digital literacy, and emotional support systems for families. Going through difficult transitions, etu jehat as separation and divorce. When investigating a case that initially appears to be a random road accident, the investigative forces must demonstrate extraordinary patience, analytical thinking, and attention to detail. In the pursuit of justice, law enforcement relies on a complex web of physical clues and psychological indicators to track down the perpetrator. The criminals in these situations often display a complete lack of sophistication, operating under the mistaken belief that they can escape detection simply by leaving the scene. In the case of the tragic loss of Brent Tesnier, the responding officers quickly recognized that the physical evidence did not align with a typical accidental event. The presence of tire marks on the victim's clothing and the unusual trajectory of the vehicle, which appeared to have veered off the shoulder of the road and then returned to the pavement, suggested a deliberate act. The police officers must piece together these physical clues while simultaneously exploring the victim's social circle to establish a motive. The breakthrough in such investigations often comes from the community itself, emphasizing the importance of public cooperation and witness testimonies. When neighbors and acquaintances come forward with information regarding recent arguments or digital disputes, the focus of the investigation shifts from a random accident to a targeted crime. Furthermore, the psychological sophistication of modern investigators allows them to identify inconsistencies in a suspect's behavior. For instance, when a suspect displays an unnatural lack of emotion or inadvertently reveals details about the crime that have not been made public, their facade begins to crumble. Physical evidence, such as the discovery of a driver's license in a highly specific location within a vehicle, can directly contradict a suspect's alibi. Even when environmental factors like rain or weather compromise physical samples such as blood or hair, the combination of circumstantial evidence and structured interviews can lead to a successful prosecution. Drawing profound life lessons from these tragic events is essential for preventing future violence and fostering safer communities. First and foremost, we must emphasize the importance of healthy communication and peaceful conflict resolution. When relationships end, the parties involved must seek professional guidance, legal mediation, or family counseling to navigate their emotions safely. Resorting to public humiliation or digital retaliation only escalates the conflict, creating a dangerous cycle of anger that can easily spiral out of control. Additionally, addressing substance abuse within communities is vital, as the combination of alcohol or drugs, vekep itehat, unresolved resentment, severely impairs judgment and leads to impulsive, destructive decisions. To assist law enforcement in catching perpetrators faster, several key strategies can be shared. The rapid preservation of digital evidence, including social media posts, text messages, and call logs, is crucial in the early hours of an investigation. Modern police departments can benefit from advanced training in digital forensics and forensic interview techniques, which help investigators navigate changing statements and identify deceptive behavior more efficiently. Public awareness campaigns that encourage community members to report threatening behavior or suspicious vehicular damage immediately can also significantly reduce the time it takes to apprehend a suspect. By honoring justice, respecting the dignity of the victims, and working together as a supportive community, we can inspire the victory of good and ensure that such heartbreaking losses are prevented. The story of Brent Tesnier is one of musical passion, personal struggles, and a search for peace that was cut short in the early morning hours of late December. Born on January 14, 1979, in Spartanburg, South Carolina, Brent seemed destined from his earliest years to live a life filled with music. His family was deeply rooted in the local musical community, and their home was a frequent gathering place for holidays and celebrations centered around song. At the tender age of 4, Brent received his first set of drums, carrying his drumsticks with him everywhere he went. As he grew, his talents expanded to singing and playing the guitar, and by his early teenage years, he was a regular performer on the local music circuit. However, the lifestyle of a young musician in a small town often came with temptations. Brent began to struggle with substance abuse, particularly alcohol, which would pose a challenge throughout his life. Despite these personal demons, he found love with his high school sweetheart, Jennifer Bragg. When they welcomed their first daughter during their teenage years, the experience profoundly moved Brent, leading him to seek a path of faith. The couple married in 1999, and Brent made a sincere effort to leave his partying lifestyle behind, studying to become a preacher and finding peace in his church work. Over the next several years, the family grew with the birth of 2 more children, and Brent worked diligently in construction and music to provide for his loved ones. Yet, the challenges of maintaining this stable lifestyle eventually took a toll on the marriage, and after 10 years, Brent and Jennifer divorced. Following the separation, Brent returned to his familiar social habits, reconnecting with a childhood acquaintance named Angelita Wright. Angelita had grown up near Brent's family and had long admired him. She quickly became a central part of his life, accompanying him to his musical gigs and joining in his active social lifestyle. Within a short time, the two were married and subsequently had 3 children together. However, the relationship was volatile, marked by a shared history of personal struggles and an inability to find stability. After 5 years of marriage, they separated, though they endeavored to co-parent their children. By the year 2015, Brent was 36 years old, working for a concrete company, writing songs, and preparing for a final divorce hearing scheduled for the upcoming February. He had purchased a modest home in the town of Cowpens, striving to create a stable environment for his children. On the night of December 26, 2015, Brent walked to a local convenience store. Around 2:00 in the morning, on December 27th, a local police officer who recognized him from the community offered him a ride home, noting that he appeared to have been drinking. Brent politely declined, explaining that he lived only a short distance away and had walked the route many times before. Tragically, just before 3:00 in the morning, passersby discovered Brent's body lying in the roadway on Cemetery Street. First responders arrived quickly, but despite their efforts, Brent passed away from internal injuries consistent with being struck and run over by a vehicle. The initial investigation was filled with uncertainty, as there were no immediate witnesses or obvious suspects. However, the dedicated officers of the Cowpens Police Department and the Spartanburg Sheriff's Office began to meticulously piece together the events of that fateful night. A physical examination of the scene revealed tire tracks that veered off the shoulder of the road and returned to the pavement, suggesting the collision may have been intentional. Soon after, the police received a tip pointing toward 2 brothers with whom Brent had a recent dispute over a missing cellular phone. The brothers drove a champagne-colored sport utility vehicle, but investigators quickly cleared them of suspicion after verifying they were out of town, attending a funeral, and their vehicle showed no signs of damage. The focus of the investigation then shifted dramatically when a neighbor named Sherry contacted the police. Sherry revealed that on the day before the tragedy, Brent had shown her a social media post on Facebook featuring explicit photographs of a woman, which he had tagged with Angelita's name. This act of digital retaliation had infuriated Angelita, who sent numerous threatening text messages demanding that the post be removed immediately. The tension escalated further when Angelita was discovered by police attempting to gain unauthorized entry into Brent's home under the pretense of retrieving personal items. When questioned, Angelita claimed she and Brent were on amicable terms and had not seen each other recently, but her defensive demeanor and dry eyes at a public memorial raised suspicions among investigators. The police soon discovered that on the night of the crime, Angelita had been traveling with a 19-year-old companion named Brandon Blackwood in his white pickup truck. Upon locating the vehicle, investigators observed damage to the front bumper, including marks that resembled blood and what appeared to be hair caught near a bolt. Brandon was brought in for questioning, and after initial hesitation, he provided a detailed statement. He claimed that he and Angelita had been consuming alcohol and substances throughout the day when they were shown the offensive social media post. According to Brandon, Angelita became extremely angry, making repeated threats against Brent's life. He stated that Angelita eventually took the driver's seat of his truck, and as they drove through the dark roads of Cowpens, they spotted Brent walking. Brandon claimed that Angelita turned on the high-beam headlights, accelerated the vehicle, and intentionally struck her husband before driving away from the scene. While Angelita steadfastly denied any involvement, claiming she had been dropped off at a friend's house hours earlier, her story began to unravel. During her interview, she accidentally revealed knowledge of the specific time of Brent's passing, a detail that the police had not shared with the public. Furthermore, a thorough search of the impounded truck revealed Angelita's driver's license inside the pocket of the driver's side door, directly contradicting her claim that she had never been on that side of the vehicle. Although the forensic tests on the bumper damage were ultimately inconclusive due to environmental exposure, the circumstantial evidence against Angelita was substantial. The case encountered a temporary complication when Brandon, during trial preparations, briefly changed his statement to claim that he had been the driver under Angelita's direction. However, he quickly corrected himself, explaining that he had given a false confession due to intense pressure and anxiety, which had been exacerbated by his prior consumption of marijuana. A subsequent polygraph examination indicated deception when Brandon claimed to be the driver, but confirmed his truthfulness when he stated that Angelita was in the vehicle. Armed with this information, the prosecutors proceeded to trial in November of 2017. During the court proceedings, the prosecution presented a compelling case, illustrating how Angelita's anger over the pending divorce and the embarrassing social media post had culminated in a fatal act of violence. They also presented a highly incriminating text message that Angelita had sent to Brandon less than 24 hours after the incident, which made a casual joke about walking to the store, reflecting a complete lack of remorse. The defense attempted to discredit Brandon by highlighting his inconsistent statements, but the jury was ultimately convinced by the cohesive timeline, the physical evidence of the driver's license, and the clear motive. On November 30th, 2017, the jury found Angelita Wright guilty of murder and she was subsequently sentenced to 30 years in prison. This tragic case serves as a solemn reminder of the devastating consequences of unresolved anger, the dangers of digital harassment, and the absolute necessity of community cooperation in the pursuit of justice.